All this week, I've been talking about Christian love, what it is, and what it requires. I want to finish today by proposing a broad definition of what Christian love both is and does. It is a very brief definition, and I didn't invent it, but keeping it in mind can help us keep faith with what we're called to be as Christian people. Hello. I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Friday, September 10th, 2021. The definition, as I say, is very short and very simple. It was first articulated by St. Thomas Aquinas, a 13th century Catholic theologian who may not be very familiar to many of us Protestants, but who is important nevertheless. He said that Christian love means to will the good of another. To will the good of another. I happen to like this definition not only because it's short and to the point, but also because it helps us sort out what love requires of us in nearly any situation we face. Here's what I believe it means. First, to will the good of another does not depend on whether we like the other person or not. We can actively hope and pray and even work toward the goal of what is good for another person, even someone who is our opponent. Imagine what our world might look like if we actually adopted this idea and fully embraced it. One of the insidious things going on in our world these days, and especially in our nation, is the tendency to paint others, our opponents, not simply as opponents, but as enemies. And in doing so, we actively begin to wish for their failure at every turn. It's gotten so ridiculous that if someone whom we consider an opponent agrees with something we say, our knee-jerk reaction is to change our opinion so that we're not seen agreeing with them. It's gotten so bad that if our opponent says the sky is blue, we're apt to say the sky's green. Along with this is the active desire to will the bad for the other. There's even a word for it, Schadenfreude, the feeling of joy at seeing the troubles or sufferings of another person. And be honest, we've all taken secret delight, and sometimes not so secret delight, in the suffering of others that we consider to be our opponents or our enemies. But Schadenfreude is the opposite of Christian love, the willing of the good for another. Second, willing the good for another is not the same thing as wanting the other person to get whatever they want. Face it, we often desire things that are not good for us, and we often bring suffering on ourselves and others as a result of the poor choices we make. Any parent who has ever had to practice what we call tough love knows what it means, that willing the good for a child sometimes means not giving a child, sometimes even an adolescent or adult child, what they want from us. A parent who has given money to an adolescent or adult child only to learn that the money wasn't spent on the new tires or the overdue electric bill, but was used instead to purchase drugs, understands perfectly well that willing the good for that child may mean cutting that child off from financial support. Willing the good does not mean giving someone whatever they ask for. Third, to will the good of another is nothing more and nothing less than willing what God wills. God does not wish evil for humankind or even for particular individuals. We collectively and each of us individually may choose what is evil, but God wills for us good, though God leaves us free to make moral choices, even when those choices are evil or self-destructive. To me, this places the idea of love as willing the good for another at the very center of our faith. How can we say we are true believers when we will the bad for another? It is like saying we believe in God, but we don't value what God values. But someone will ask, where does that leave societies that have to punish evildoers, or nations that have to wage war against other nations, which includes killing people in combat? The answer to this may first sound like a cop-out, but it is deeply true nonetheless. We live in a deeply sinful and fallen world where evil must be actively opposed and even punished. We live in a world where nations must protect their citizens from harm that may come from other nations. So to participate in these things does involve us in the web of sin in the world, but, and this is a big but, to refuse to participate in the world's struggles also implicates us in the web of sin by placing the burden of on others to do what we're not willing to do. This is partly why we Reformed Christians have never been truly pacifist. We work for peace and we value it highly, but the ugly realities of life in the world mean we cannot escape the web of sin by simply opting out. We're still caught up in the web of sin, just in a different way. Now, the beauty of this definition of Christian love is that it works on every level of relationship, from the most intimate to the most distant. And while it doesn't tell us in each and every situation exactly what we should do, it still provides a sort of moral compass that points us unfailingly in the right direction, even if sometimes we get it wrong. To will the good of another. That's an understanding of Christian love we can really hang our hat on. And now may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.